Okay, welcome to this evening's meeting of the Standing Advisory Council on Religious Education, Thursday the 12th of January. I'm Councillor Andrew Wall, chairs meeting. So let's just go through apologies for absence. Councillor Fitzpatrick, take the gold, and Kirsty Wordsworth. Apologies, and just for clarification, we have Olivia Seymour on the internet. So, Olivia, want to...
Evening, I'm here. You can't see me, but hopefully you can hear me.
Thank you very much. That was just to make it clear to people what's going on there. Some people may be coming in a bit late. Declarations of interest. Already. That's right, I'm afraid, although this meeting was scheduled in order for all groups to be represented. Unfortunately, this morning, due to illness, too late to continue meeting. So minutes of the previous meeting and matters arising. So are we happy with the minutes of the last meeting? That's good. Okay, so we'll actually through those. Okay, so that brings us on to item for the annual report.
Yes, if I start then.
Use your mic, please. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Cheers.
Sorry. Yes, Chair, I'll just give an overview of the annual report and then I'll can add anything from her point of view as our lead advisor. We obviously convened this meeting in order to sign off the annual report, but we do need to be quorate in order to do so. And I understand from Olivia that there is some delay nationally in SACRE's signing off their annual reports this year, largely for a couple of reasons, one of which being that some information, particularly around Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5 results, is still not available for SACRE's to include in their reports, which is causing some delay to submitting them to the Department for Education and SACRE. We're also in that position, so we've got an almost finished annual report at the moment. But what I would urge is that we do need, as a matter of urgency, to be able to sign off the annual report at the next meeting on the 1st of February. It's the 1st of February, isn't it, our next meeting? So it's really very, very important that we are quorate at that meeting. I did want to deal with it under any urgent business, but with the Chair's permission, I would like to suggest a way forward of us doing that, and it would be to update the constitution of SACRE to allow colleagues to join hybrid meetings, so to join the meeting online to help really with that issue of quoracy, so that we are able to accept that we are quorate if people join from the different groups by that method. And Ange Clark
if you would like to add to that.
We need to be quorate to be able to approve that.
Right.
So we
yeah.
need, so we
it will have to be.
need an
brought to the
in-person,
next-
yeah, we
yeah.
need an in-person meeting to formally approve that
Thank you
change.
for that, for clarifying that bit of process for us, Ange. So it's doubly important really that we are quorate at the February meeting to be able to make that change, which I feel would actually give us the flexibility to help to move SACRE business forward in a timely way. But also, really, really importantly, that we're quorate to agree and sign off the annual report so that it can actually then be reported to the DFE and to SACRE.
Before we leave that point, and can you get legal to clarify whether that would cover Group D? Because we are forbidden as councillors from having virtual meetings.
Right.
Yeah, I'll take advice from our monitoring officer on that after the meeting.
So it may be that
Yes.
Group D does not fall into that category because we are covered by local government regulations that won't accept hybrid
I think
decision making, but in terms of other groups could operate differently within the
because
constitution.
SACRE is part of the 1996 Education Act and is sort of not in the same, the meetings are not governed in the same way as the 1972 Act for local government. I think Bryn was going to clarify that point for us, wasn't he? Because he thinks these are covered by a different set of rules.
Yes. SACRE is legally classed as an outside body, albeit that it's a statutory body. So there's variation of practice nationally, but my experience in SACREs in the region is that some have chosen to do a hybrid model, and I certainly attend some SACREs where Committee D members do join hybrid meetings virtually, and I think it is, as Maxine said, it is to do with the legal status of SACRE as an outside body in that respect. But obviously our constitution at the moment doesn't enable us to do the hybrid meetings.
Okay, I've just got questions from Councillor Cuthbertson, and was a question from Councillor Rowley?
No,
All right.
say hello.
All right.
That's great. Traffic in York.
Right.
The Director of Transport.
More a statement than a question, Chair. As I understand it, this is not a committee of the council, but it's an outside body, which is why it's not down as a council committee in the calendar, interestingly enough. So
Okay.
I'm sure Bryn will confirm them.
Right, well, just wanted that confirming because in other in other meetings, we're not allowed to. So, right, okay, so
what we've done in formulating the annual report is obviously we have used the SACRE guidance. We've followed that around the structure of a SACRE annual report. I'd like to thank Councillor Cuthbertson for his input in terms of the introduction to the 21-22 report, and we've put in all the relevant information. And the only bit now that we do need to add is just a brief summary of the Key Stage 4 and Key Stage 5 outcomes, which will be there by the quorate meeting on the 1st of February. Olivia, have you got anything to add?
No, nothing at this stage. It was just the data, which you've already mentioned. Thanks, Maxine.
just before we move off quoracy issues, would you like to give an update on Group B membership?
Yes. Yeah, Group B, which is the group which represents the Church of England, the membership obviously has to be nominated by and approved by the Diocese of York Board of Education. And my understanding is from Olivia that you are sourcing a second member for that to ensure that that group also will be able to be quorate at meetings, because at the moment obviously there is only one named member, which does cause problems, as we've had tonight, where somebody is ill. and that's an unavoidable absence. Olivia, I think you've taken that back to the diocesan board to actually confirm who that second person will be.
Yes, that's correct. I think when the constitution was put together, it was agreed that one member would be sufficient, but I think I was given permission before Christmas just to seek a second member. Apologies that I was delayed in doing that because of illness, but I should have it confirmed by the end of this week, and so we should have a second member in place for our next meeting in February.
Yeah, and I think that will make that group more resilient, obviously, and also will add to the quoracy of SACRE as a whole, because then we should then avoid problems where people have got clashes in diaries or are unavoidably ill.
Thank you. Are there any other points from the annual reports then?
So I had to read twice to understand there was a difference between the locally agreed syllabus, the schools that follow and the schools who've adopted. Can you just explain what the difference is, and maybe we can find a way of putting it in the report that might be immediately understandable?
Yeah, so obviously schools that follow are required to follow the locally agreed syllabus are schools that are maintained by the local authority. Schools that adopt the locally agreed syllabus are those state schools that choose to do so, state-funded schools that choose to do so, but they're not maintained by the local authority. So we have obviously the academies that are state-funded schools, but are not subject to being maintained by the local authority. And they have a choice of whether to adopt our locally agreed syllabus or another syllabus. And obviously that's also the position with faith schools, you know, that they can choose to adopt the locally agreed syllabus, but are not required to do so. Olivia, as our RE advisor, do you want to advise on the technicalities?
Yes, so it is around the legality. So an agreed syllabus is the legal document for community schools and voluntary controlled church schools. In law, they're required to follow the agreed syllabus. And academies, in the legal documentation for academies, it makes clear that they must ensure that their RE curriculum follows the legal expectations of an agreed syllabus, but the language says an agreed syllabus rather than the agreed syllabus in the authority that they reside. Now in York, I think we're very grateful that because of the local partnerships, the majority of schools do follow the agreed syllabus, even when they convert to academy status. And that's one of the strengths, I think, in terms of our SACRE relationship with schools, but they're technically not required to adopt it. Where faith schools are concerned, if a school is voluntary aided, then it comes under its trust deed, so it wouldn't follow the agreed syllabus. Roman Catholic schools would follow the guidance of their bishops, and Church of England schools follow the guidance of the diocese and the Church of England nationally, and so there's diocesan syllabuses or diocesan frameworks for them to follow.
Thank you for that. Any other questions on the annual report? Okay, so that will come again in 1st of March meeting.
It's completely finished.
Okay. Right, that brings us on to item 5, which is the monitoring role of this committee. And Maxine, are you leading on that?
Yeah, obviously we've spoken at SACRE meetings previously about the ways in which we can fulfil the statutory duties around monitoring the quality of RE in schools and also collective worship. And we've looked at various ways that we can do that, and the paper in front of you is about developing a programme of monitoring visits to schools. what I've done is I've looked at SACREs that already have frameworks for monitoring schools through visits, and looked at some of the activity that is in place nationally in the work of SACREs, and it is varied. Some SACREs don't do monitoring visits to schools at all, but where they do provide monitoring visits, what they are looking to do is to provide a supportive visit, which in the main is used to highlight examples of best practice and to really develop the sharing of best practice across a local area with relation to RE. They're also as well very much inviting schools to get involved in monitoring visits and to view them as a positive. And so, as you can see, what I've put down is some ideas about what might constitute a monitoring visit, and to develop that as in partnership with the school, so that it's felt to be supportive and useful to support both the subject leaders in RE and also the school as a whole in developing its understanding of the role of the RE curriculum at whole school level, particularly around the requirements within the Education Act around collective worship. So this paper is making some suggestions about how as SACRE we could actually do that. Andy, who is here to represent Group C, which is teachers of RE, has very kindly volunteered to be the guinea pig to begin the visits. And I think we will learn a lot from that. I've suggested a cycle of visits to develop the process in 22-23 with a view to then really using that to develop the framework for visits that we would then fully introduce in the academic year 23-24, so that the schools have got confidence that it's been co-produced as a process. I am going to be speaking to the Maintain School Heads Network tomorrow afternoon about the role of the SACRE monitoring visits, so that we're also developing that with the head teachers as well as with the relevant subject leads. So I am going to suggest that our first visits are with our schools that are represented here through SACRE. So we do have a representative of secondary RE, who is Taco, who works at Joseph Rowntree. So it felt useful that we actually pilot the visits with our teacher representatives at Ralph Butterfield and at Joseph Rowntree. I am suggesting as well a visit to Clifton Green, because during their full Ofsted inspection, one of the deep dives was in RE. So I think it would be useful to draw on their experience of that deep dive, and then to go to our other maintained secondary school, which is Huntington Secondary, because it's also important to recognise that, you know, SACRE has a particular responsibility around monitoring the quality of education within the maintained school sector. We would then obviously go to the academies in terms of them opting into some of these visits. Again, Olivia, would you like to offer some advice in terms of that RE advisor advice around that?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges in terms of the legal framework for SACREs is technically we do have a responsibility to monitor standards in all schools in the local authority, which includes academies, but recognising that the relationship with academies is quite different. So I think that co-producing and developing something that enables everybody to be part of it, I think is particularly important. And it's about seeing things in action, but it's about us as SACRE members becoming more confident of being able to articulate best practice within our local authority, being able to signpost schools, and for the annual report next year, that this might provide also examples of best practice that we can share in the annual report to exemplify some of the things that we're saying about quality of religious education in the local authority.
We also feel as well, obviously, it will be an opportunity for SACRE members on a rolling programme to actually go and be part of a monitoring visit, which is why we're suggesting that we put in some training starting in the February session about, you know, sort of how to approach that monitoring visit in schools, because, you know, it's not an inspection. It's very much about some fact finding. It's done in a supportive way. And it's to allow school colleagues to really show the best of what's happening in schools, but also to collect information from those schools about where they may need further help and support around, you know, what's needed to support subject leaders with CPD, and also to get that information on the ground. From those leaders about what would work best in terms of encouraging those RE networks across the city. So it's that live opportunity to really get to know more about the delivery of RE in schools, and as I say, to really shine a light on those really good things that are happening in our schools day to day. So what we would be proposing is to ask SACRE members to volunteer to become part of that first visit, which would be on Thursday the 23rd of February. It would be a 1:30 p.m. start. Yeah, Andy, and just ask SACRE members to check their diaries. It's something that they could be involved in, and to use that opportunity to get it started.
Councillor Rowley.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Maxine, and Olivia for this. So just a couple of thoughts and kind of observations, really. And so I've been a school governor for it'll be 30 years this year. I've been governing schools. So I've seen a lot of things change, as I know many of you have that are involved in education. One of the things that has been constant is staff are very, very cautious about people coming in. Obviously that we all know that Ofsted knock on the door on a regular basis, but for example in the Catholic schools they have their own religious education inspection that comes in, and essentially we're putting another layer on there. So my other observation is that obviously a school can turn down the offer of a visit. So I'm really interested to see how this is going to be sold to a school. And again, I'm now a governor in an academy. I was a governor at St Aelred's for many years, so I've been involved in that Catholic education, and now I'm at an academy school. And they are very kind of parochial. I mean, it's very much, you know, we know what we're doing. So I'm just conscious as to how this would be received by the schools, what the purpose would be beyond what already is in place in terms of particularly the Catholic schools, and what would the outcome look like? So obviously when you get an inspection from the end, if it's not an inspection, but when you get an inspection from Ofsted, there's an Ofsted action plan that's a mandatory requirement. When the Catholic diocese do their inspections of schools, there's an action plan that kind of falls in place. And you know, and the good practices are highlighted as well as those challenging areas. So for me, I'm just curious. I think generally it's a good thing. If it's a requirement of SACRE, then it's got to be a good thing. But I'm just curious as to how, you know, how it's going to be received, what would be expected afterwards, and then would a school then fall into a kind of a repeat visit to make sure they're doing what we've asked them to do? Is that kind of thing, Maxine?
Yeah. As I said, I've looked at what's happening in other areas of the country, and what they very much do is they put school visits onto a cycle of visits, so that it may well be, you know, sort of it's something like a 3-year cycle, for example. They all of them stress, all of the SACREs that do these monitoring visits, that it's designed not to replicate anything like Ofsted. It is designed to very much be about SACRE understanding more about how RE is delivered in schools. And as I said, to be also shining a light on and celebrating what is going really, really well in those areas. And I think one of the things that it will be really useful to do as well is to build those networks across schools where subject leaders and coordinators like Andy are also helped to put in place those networks around developing best practice. And there is a bit of a gap around that at the moment in York, where it's okay if you're in a multi-academy trust and you may have those networks and those regular meetings, but sometimes the ways in which people find it easy to share information are getting more and more difficult at that coordinator level. So, you know, who's got that really good stuff around developing teaching and learning resources around Buddhism or whatever it is? It just helps to create those shortcuts for people as well. Of, oh, you know, I've heard you're doing really good things. Could we share it?
Yeah. So, Chair, a supplementary, Chair, if I might. So you've segued beautifully into my next kind of supplementary, really, is that we have a number of faith groups around the table, and so if the member of that faith group was on the team that went in to do the monitoring, would it necessarily be expected that faith leader or faith group leader would be looking for that particular element of delivery? And so forgive me, if Ben wasn't on there, does that mean that, you know, the whole kind of Jewish ethos wouldn't be looked at, or is it just, would it just simply be that Ben happens to be there and he would be looking to highlight that? I'm just slightly curious. Whilst I absolutely value all of our faith members and none, I recognise that obviously when you begin to bring that and put that into a team of people that are going, so with the exemption of our faith members, the rest of us on SACRE have no outward faith leaning or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious as to how that would work, because I think it's valuable,
yeah.
But how would it work?
Yeah.
And forgive me, gentlemen, I had no intention of.
Olivia, I just hear that you were wanting to come in there.
Yeah, I was just going to chip in that the next item on the agenda is around looking forward to our February meeting, where the proposal is that we will do some training together as members before going in and doing school visits. You raised some important questions, so it will be about agreeing. Many SACREs who do this have a policy for members when they're going in to do school visits, so that it's really clear what we are doing and what we're not doing when we go in. So to answer the faith members question, it's not about checking out on very specific things like that. It is more in the same way, if we're a governor and we're going in to a school, we're going to see things in action. We're not going to make judgments, because that is left to the professionals, but there's clear protocols and procedures. So one of the things that I was going to propose as part of that training is I brought some starters for 10 of what that could look like, so that we shape something together that means we're all in agreement about those protocols and procedures. And just to answer the other question you had, Martin, and you mentioned about our Catholic schools and Section 48 inspection. SACRE has no legal remit over religious education in our Church of England voluntary aided schools or in our Roman Catholic schools because of that legal framework with Section 48. So those schools wouldn't fall under this monitoring cycle because we don't have a legal remit. That doesn't mean our partnerships with those schools, doesn't mean that they might invite us in to see something of best practice that they're doing, and those partnerships are important and valuable, but we don't have any remit over religious education in those contexts. So I would suggest that those invites to come in would come from those schools as opposed to us requesting to go in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, ladies.
Okay, right. We've got Ian, then Ben, then Darius, and then.
I'll pass mostly, Chair, except to say I think we have a protocol for governor visits, linked governor visits, which might be appropriate to lift. I'm sure Olivia's got some further thoughts on that. I think it's important to think in terms of, if you are a governor at the school, what would the staff be thinking about when you walk through the door, and how would you speak to them? So it's kind of less the external visitor, more the supportive friend, I think, is the way that I would see it. Certainly from linked governor visits at the schools where I'm a governor, that's what we experience. The other question was going to be about the length of time you propose to deal with training and when, and I see that's the next agenda item, so I'll leave that to you. Thank you.
Just before we move away from that point, in terms of people listed, the governor at the school who has the link with our could be invited.
Yes.
Just thinking that if you're got an Ofsted independent link, then it's always helpful to feel that they can also witness and use that as supporting the work of the governing body. Ben. Right. So.
And I would like to record my thanks as well to Liz, the head teacher at Ralph Butterfield, because she's also championing this visit. So that's really helpful.
Thank you. So Ben's point's been covered, Darius.
I was just making a comment on the question of how the school is receiving this monitoring. I feel that this process of monitoring has another benefit that we can sort of highlight for the schools, and that is when we are coming to review or renew the syllabus, we will need the feedback from the schools. And one of the benefits of this, when we don't need to use the word monitoring, we can use another word to reflect that we are also looking at the information. We want to see how it is delivered, what are the problems, what are the shortcomings, which then we can feed that into the conference for renewal syllabus.
Okay, Maxine, right, I'll just take that on board. Andy?
Thank you, Chair. It was just on the point of teachers, and just from my own personal experience, sort of having visitors come in and then perhaps feeling apprehensive is not the right word, but just sort of being very aware of having those visitors come into school. And in the last SACRE meeting, it was one of the things that I raised in how would this be framed, and would it be framed in a positive way? And one great benefit of having a visitor who, although we have a responsibility to monitor, who is coming in almost a supportive fashion and not necessarily under the banner of judgment or the banner of saying, like, you know, and how that comes across to staff. If it comes in that sense of, we really like this element, oh, have you considered this could really help this area, or you could develop this area further. And there's ways in which you're framing that where it can become viewed as a really supportive and useful tool that can help an RE coordinator who's perhaps uncertain or who's struggling to kind of go, right, okay, this is where I need to focus my attention now. And certainly those RE teachers who have benefited from the training that I know that we've put on previously, but also just supporting them in their ongoing journey with RE in the school. So it is just making sure that, from my point of view, and I've already found myself at the very beginning, before the meeting began, sort of saying to Maxine, oh gosh, you know, and just worrying about it a little bit. And I think that's quite a natural response as a teacher, because we do want to do the very best, and we are constantly reviewing ourselves and judging ourselves in that fashion. So I do think if it can be framed in that way of support and encouragement, then I think that could be really beneficial.
Yeah. And, sorry, Chair, can I just ask, how many would you want on in the team that visits?
I think no more than 4, because I think it gets quite overwhelming for schools.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know, the advice is that it's an advisor from SACRE plus, you know, sort of members of SACRE who would make the visits. So yeah, I think, you know, keep it quite tight.
And if I might then, Chair, just say, for those elected members around the table, we know we're going to be here in February and April. We may not be here in June and July, or we may not be on this committee if we are. So from my point of view, I am available both, well, any time really, but I would be keen, if I was to be involved, to be in either the February or April meetings.
The February one will be like relief before Budget Council. Derek.
Just shortly, in the words that we've been using as monitoring, I think a word reflection meeting would be more appropriate.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So any other comments on that before we come on to discussing the training, the next session? I think it's Olivia. Olivia's leading on this, because I think when we discussed this, Olivia, you were keen to understand questions from members to know what to include in the training session. So
absolutely, thank you. And I'm already making some points for myself based on the questions that we've had already. So I think what would be helpful in the training is if we do a brief overview of the context of RE, update members and some reminders on the agreed syllabus and key elements of the agreed syllabus, so that we've had that information, so we know what are the ingredients that should be in an RE curriculum in one of our schools when we go to visit. But I think the points about it being a supportive visit are really important. And also, we're not making judgments. I think the challenge is that the language in the expectations for SACRE says monitoring, but really what these visits are about is us getting to know our schools well, building relationships with our schools, knowing what's working, what's not working. So what I was going to propose to do was give a brief overview for members about RE. I think we probably want to put collective worship in a different training session, because it'd be quite a lot to cover otherwise. Bring some starters for 10 on what a simple pro forma could look like, key things to put in a policy and our procedures, and potentially some questions that we can use to have our conversation with subject leaders, but again, more about us finding out how we can help them and how we can support the development of RE. So that's my sense of what might be helpful, but of course it's your training, so I can go away and do that, but if it's not the right training and it doesn't cover everything that you would want it to cover, it's not going to be effective. So I'd really value hearing from members if there's specific things you would want me to include in that training, so that you feel equipped to do those visits ongoing.
Okay. Thank you for that, Olivia. Any? Andy?
Hi Olivia, I'm certainly have already thought of it, but just for members, and just how, I suppose, more about how to communicate with staff and how to communicate within that environment and what we're kind of expecting, although I'm certain that obviously with the performer and things that will all be covered under that, because of it, teaching staff sort of with familiar with certain ways of working, if that makes sense. Or that's quite ambiguous.
No, that does, thank you. And then if there's any particular things you want to make sure I include in that, then do feel free to email some pointers and I'll make sure I build that in.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other points? If you do think of any, I'm sure that Olivia's email address is Yes.
Sorry, Chair. Again, the non-elected members of this group probably won't be aware, but as elected members, we have an induction program that we go through when we become councillors. We have worked hard to put together a new induction program for councillors that come in, and you'll be aware we have local elections in May, and it may well be that you know, governors councillors that then come to sit on this body, some form of kind of SACRE induction program might be good, and if we can incorporate that into the
yes, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, and that might be something helpful to put on a meeting agenda to talk about formalising our induction procedures in terms of support for new members, documentation, etc. I think would be really helpful.
it would indeed. Right. Okay. On to any other questions? We'll go on to agenda item 7, which the ONS figures were only just published on the day of the last meeting, and so everyone will have zoomed in on the maps and looked at the figures nationally and for York. Ben, this has been included at your request.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that, but I was glad to see it on the agenda, so I must have been coherent. It just struck me that we should have a look and ask ourselves whether this raised any issues for us. So, for example, it's immediately obvious that the vast majority of people in York who identify either as Christian or as non-religious, and the rest of us are really largely irrelevant. Although at least the Muslim community is slightly bigger, and probably we should make certain that that's reflected in what we ask schools to do.
Yeah.
I'm glad Ben remembers requesting it. I think I also requested it beyond Chair. I think just to echo what Ben was saying, I think 37% of respondents in the census have replied saying that they had no religious view, and most of those commonly describe themselves as agnostic, atheist, or humanist. And I think this has got huge implications. That's a huge number of people, you know, and the pupils that we're responsible for fall within that category. So we're talking about 22 million families responding in that way. So we're talking about a lot of people nationally, and they are more or less the same, I think, within York. I don't, as the humanist rep, claim to represent the views of those 22 million people, and I certainly think we need to be very cautious about the minorities. You know, in terms of whatever size the Jewish or Muslim community is, they need to be fully represented, because we all know what happens when societies and communities forget about the minorities and do not look after those minorities. So I'm not here to say, you know, the majority don't believe, therefore the majority should say what's going on. You know, it's not as simple as that. But I do think that we do have a responsibility as a SACRE to make sure that we ensure that those that don't have a theistic view, that have a non-religious worldview, have some way through the education system of knowing what an ethical, you know, being able to look at ethical and existential questions from a non-religious, non-theistic perspective, and how can we be good without God? You know, that it seems to me to be fairly crucial. It's quite a while, I think it was 2018 when the Committee on Racial Equality reported, and one of the things that they said was that too many pupils are not receiving their entitlement to knowledge of religions and non-religious worldviews. And I'm just concerned that we've not moved very far in that time. At the risk of sounding like a crack record, Olivia will be waiting for me to say this, the agreed syllabus has made baby steps. You know, our agreed syllabus doesn't reflect non-religious worldviews. At best, it's an afterthought. There's no specific direct teaching about humanism or any other worldviews, but there is about all the different religions. And what I'd like to propose, Chair, and I don't know whether we can do this, whether we're quorate or not, is that we as a SACRE make a commitment prior to the agreeing of the next agreed syllabus that we will commit to ensuring that the non-religious worldviews are fully and properly reflected in the next agreed syllabus. The last time we met to agree the syllabus, I felt as though it was quite a rush. We met in our committee groups, and you know, SACRE is structurally biased towards theism. You know, I am the one out of the 11 on Committee A that represents a non-religious worldview, and I think legally there's no reason why I need to be here. You know, you could get rid of me at any time you wanted, which when I shut up, you might want to. So what I don't want to do is to get to the point like we did last time, where we looked at the agreed syllabus and I said, I don't think it fully reflects a non-religious worldview, and I was voted down quite unanimously. Now, that's fair enough, it's democracy, and I was happy to agree to the syllabus because it did make some advances towards that. I would not be happy if we moved towards that position again where we had an agreed syllabus that doesn't acknowledge it, you know, that hasn't moved on from where this agreed syllabus is now. So that's what I'd like to propose on the basis of this, in that, if that's possible, Chair.
Right. Maxine, do you want to
I think
comment on where this would put us?
Yeah, I think it's obviously one of the things that needs to be brought back to a quorate meeting. But I think it is one of the areas that teachers often describe that they find, teachers of RE find most difficult, Andy, don't you, is how you develop that aspect of the curriculum. Do you want to come in there, Andy?
Yeah, so I'm currently an upper key stage 2 teacher, although I have taught up and down the primary setting, and certainly one of the things that we have explored is utilising the bits and pieces that you've shared previously and taking snippets of that and building that in alongside the agreed syllabus. It's things like just looking at humanist practices, and for example, and one of the things that children are particularly interested in is sort of a wedding ceremony, in that sense, because they've seen those in other religious studies, and aspects such as that and aspects of daily sort of lives and community and the way that would shape for humanists, that is something that I think would be welcomed from my personal opinion as a classroom.
In terms of training, we have provided, well, say we, it wasn't SACRE specific, but I arranged for regional training from Luke Donnellan of Humanists UK on understanding humanism that was run in 2020. But of course, we know that subject leaders change over time. So one thing that I think we could do relatively swiftly is organise for an online training that was specific from York SACRE and ask Humanists UK, particularly because of the new resources and the core knowledge document, which I think is a really helpful document at helping schools to think about how they do in a systematic way build in particular humanism across all key stages. So that might be a helpful thing to do that doesn't require us to wait until a revision of a syllabus, because I absolutely take the point that there were some questions about the syllabus previously, and we know that the legal context changed with Fox in 2015 and the requirements to build in non-religious worldviews. And I think it's about syllabuses will do so much, and I think we do need to make sure that that's built in as part of that overview looking at the syllabus. But the challenge is a syllabus doesn't write the curriculum for our schools either. So I think some practical examples, particularly around knowledge progression and around resources, can be addressed without waiting until a review of the syllabus, and show that we're doing something in the meantime.
Yeah, I'd agree, Olivia. I think that's a helpful way forward for us to begin to look at that, and it does, it shows as well that York SACRE is being active in looking at areas where we're championing further development.
Ian,
Yeah, thank you for that, and thanks, Olivia. And, you know, I think there's a lot of positive things there, and I certainly wasn't suggesting that, you know, schools weren't doing them. So I would hate you to think I was criticising that. But it's just when you look at the syllabus, it's not an opinion; it's just counting.
Yes.
You know, the reflection isn't there. So that commitment towards looking at the syllabus, looking at the core document that I shared. So that would be great to move things forward before then. But I would still like to push for some formal statement from the committee, from SACRE, saying that is something that we as a group are committed to, because clearly we are by the work that's been done already. But I'd like that to be recognised and minuted at some point.
I think what would be helpful, because we know that we have to have another meeting in order to be correct, that would provide time for that resolution to be worded and circulated in and out, so we knew what was being voted on.
Yeah, I think if we add it to the agenda as an item for the 1st of February, yeah.
And with permission, if members are content that some online training for teachers would be helpful, I'm happy to pursue that in. I'm happy to work with you on it. I'm happy, I've got Luke's contact details, so I would be happy to contact and explore some dates where that might be possible, that we could then just advertise it to York schools if people feel that that's an appropriate thing to do.
Yeah, that would be, sorry, that would be really good, and thanks for that, Olivia. I'd be happy to involve yourself with that as well. With you.
That would be brilliant. Thank you, Ian.
Okay. Just from looking at the online maps, because they did delve into very geographic specific areas. I live on the less godly side of Ascombe Lane. The other side, 2/3 have a religious view, but it was interesting how some areas were very different within the city, and therefore it would be helpful for schools to look at their catchments and recognise what the breakdown for their particular area relates. It was interesting to have that level of granular detail available, and it would be helpful to work that into any future review of the syllabus.
Yeah, and obviously we've sent the first SACRE newsletter around schools this week, and probably an item for a future newsletter would be to highlight for teachers the access to the ONS data and use that to just think about their school population.
Yeah.
Chair, just to say as well that I do have some resources that are school focused to help schools think about how they might use the data in the classroom. Very happy to share that with Andrew for the next primary RE network, if that's helpful.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Right. Thanks for that. Any other points on the ONS? All right. 8 is the work plan. I think we have covered that already. So that brings us on to urgent business. I don't have any urgent business. So see you all on the 1st of February. Thank you very much.